Morning, everybody. Welcome to Dazzling, the Dazzling session. Dazzling is a green tea. It's from Anhui Province. And today, throughout the session, we'll be referencing green tea in relationship to alleged health benefits. We'll be talking about Anhui Province and its total relationship to green tea and to tea in general. And we'll relate a story or two from the shop. So let's start out with a story or two from the shop. This week, we had the very fortunate opportunity to spend some time with a couple customers who one of them bought a white clay pot from here. And so we went through a session, a small cup session, because it's a smaller pot, and taught them how to use it. And in addition, we had another customer who brought in their own pot. And this was a really interesting, and they had never used it. The pot had plenty of time in their hands. They'd had it for 13 years, but had never used it. So this is a perfect time for a learning opportunity. And so we spent a couple hours with everybody. And what was really interesting and striking right away is we used the same tea for both pots. We used the same amount of tea for both pots. And for the white clay pot, everything came out really bright. The customer who had just paid a king's ransom for that was really, really happy. Tasted really, really good. This was a cliff tea, obviously, doing this in an Asian pot. When we tried the other pot, also an alleged Asian pot. It's not from here, so we don't know for sure, but it looked and sounded like it might be one. The tea flavor, and everybody acknowledged this, including the person who belonged to the pot, that the flavor was flat. And if you had tasted it in isolation, you wouldn't have known how flat. By tasting first the white clay pot, the tea that was produced in the white clay pot, and then following it immediately, and again, everything was the same. By accident, everything was the same. Same grammage, same. The only thing that was slightly different was the size, the volume of the pot was slightly different. I believe something like 6 grams versus, did I say grams? I did. 6 ounces versus 8 ounces, I believe was the difference. But everything else was the same. And yet there was this very, very obvious taste differential. So this is one of the things that when you start doing things side by side, things become more obvious. It's easy to hear us say this stuff because we've done over the years many of these comparisons side by side, and certainly we've done them with many, many, many different types of pots over the years. And so we know what these teas can taste like, and we also know what the teas do taste like in various pots. So that was really an interesting part of shop news this week. Additionally, we had more interesting experiments in the shop. And for those of you who are unaware, Wednesday mornings, typically Rob brings in some new experiment that he's been working on. And this is all related to bread or cakes, anything that's using flour. And therefore, past 2 or 3 months, we've been able to taste some wondrous creations that he's made, including, and I think I mentioned it at the time that he was doing it, he used Earth Spirit, which is one of our true black teas, to create a starter. And that starter has produced some wonderful, wonderful sourdough bread that's produced some other goodies that he's made. Well, this week he brought in olive oil cake, which was just fabulous. And it was different than what I've had in the past because it was a little bit denser. But different doesn't mean not as good. From my perspective, it was really interesting. So we're seeing a lot of different things from that he's producing, and it's really a fun journey to watch. And the way he's linked it also to tea craft has been very interesting. All right, so let's get to Dazzling. And before we talk a ton about Dazzling itself, let's talk about green teas and alleged health benefits, because you hear all this information. Sometimes you hear it from a doctor, sometimes you see it in the New York Times or any other media outlet that you're looking at. Sometimes you see it over the internet. Some of the claims seem fantastical. Some of the claims seem, I don't quite understand. They may raise the question in your mind, well, why is it this way or that way? So let's look for a moment at who's driving this and what sorts of things are coming out, and what should you take to the health bank and what should you hold off on. So let's start with who's been doing green tea over the years. So lots of research has come from Japan. Japan started early on with a lot of research about green tea. China picked it up and also has been doing a lot of research on green tea. And the US also got involved in green tea research. So you have three very science-driven countries that have produced a lot of different articles about green tea. So in the green tea literature, what you see is, oh, you got catechins. Oh, those catechins, they're a chemical compound. They're actually a polyphenol. They have alleged benefits. It's easy to see the alleged benefits, and early on, it was easy to see the alleged benefits in test tubes. So you put tumor cells in, you put EGCG, and the tumor cells decrease. That's real good. It's much less clear, although some aspects of alleged health benefits are very clear in animal studies, because it's test tube, animal, and then human. And in the animal studies, you get lots of clarity about some of the alleged antimicrobial benefits of green tea. You see it in the use of salves and putting it on the skin as a potential for taking care of antifungal issues or fungal issues that may occur on the skin. So you do see some of that, and you see enough of that so that the medical community is kind of nodding their head at that. On the other hand, when you talk about heart and cardiovascular health, you're seeing quite a lot of head nodding in the medical community. So you see doctors in various cardiovascular organizations say, yeah, green tea is really important because it helps the blood vessels. It seems to produce a lower blood pressure. And we got to be clear about this, because I'm saying these things and all of you are beginning to think, oh yeah, maybe I should be drinking a lot more green tea. Let's be careful, because the studies indicate that if you drink around 3 cups, remembering cups at Sophie's has one sort of Sophie's definition, but in the science community, a cup is a cup. That's 8 ounces. So drinking somewhere between 16 and 24 ounces of green tea on a daily basis, and they've gone through some experiments in England, they've gone through some experiments in China, and they've gone through some experiments in the US. And what they're finding in terms of blood pressure is that it seems on an average, and so you notice I'm footnoting everything because this is not Western medicine. It isn't, you take a pill and the next day you get a result. This is, you start a habit, you maintain a habit, and then months later, oh gosh, I see a result. So on average, for the blood pressure thing, what they're seeing is about a 6.5% decrease. So is it equivalent to blood pressure medicine? The answer is no, because blood pressure, Western medicine, is designed to be taken until you get to a target range of blood pressure. Green tea and the reduction of blood pressure isn't to a target. It's more for an overall generalized better working of your cardiovascular system. So you see plenty of doctors talk about, particularly if you've had heart issues, yeah, drink that green tea. Because they're convinced and by the literature that green tea on the overall system is going to have a real good effect. I footnoted all of this stuff. Why? Because there was a major article that I believe was a joint article from the US and China, which said, okay, and it came out this year. Look, folks, we understand that green tea seems to have a real good antibacterial effect. We understand that it's high in antioxidants, and that seems to be good for human health. Also, we understand that it's been proven through studies that it's good for cardiovascular health. So there's several areas where in test tubes it's been proven without doubt. In animal studies, it seems to have been proven pretty well, but in human studies, it's still not enough. You can't take this stuff to the bank in terms of science. And that's the one thing I want to point out today, because yes, clearly it's on everybody's mind. Clearly EGCG is a very powerful catechin. And clearly there's an interaction among all the catechins and among all the other phenolic substances or polyphenols. There is some sort of interaction. We still don't know. And this article emphasized, don't stop doing what you're doing in terms of drinking green tea. It kind of led with that. But it said, stop assuming that you know the complete answer to what the end results are, because we don't. And we need more science research. And this is what this article was urging. Everything looks real promising. So in the absence of any negative results, yeah, it's easy for me to say, yes, let's keep drinking our green tea, because it looks like in the long haul, no matter what, it's going to have a favorable result, and it's certainly not going to damage it. So that's kind of the thrust of where we are now. And this next 5 years is going to be really critical, because scientists really do know that, again, for oral health, as an example, that green tea among human subjects has been shown to be beneficial. But more quantification needs to happen. Yes.
Jonathan asks, is there a difference in effectiveness or absorption, et cetera, of drinking actual green tea versus a green tea supplement, i.e. pill or a capsule, or any difference reported that you read about?
So this is a really, really great question because the nutraceutical industry, as we all know, would like to be your doctor, which means if they can find a magic pill. So let's back up. When did this tendency start? This is not a tendency that started within the last 100 years. This has been thousands of years old. And start with the Taoists, who said, okay, folks, we're going to find the forever life elixir. And we're going to experiment with this and experiment with that. So they went at it, the Taoists did, one element at a time. Took one thing, am I going to live forever? Oh, that didn't work. I didn't live forever. Okay, let's go to the next thing. The nutraceutical industry, in some way, has that tendency because everybody knows EGCG is the very active catechin, which seems to be the leader in producing results. And so therefore, you get supplements which talk about we're a green tea supplement and we're derived and concentrated, take me, and all your troubles will go away. Oh, wait a minute. They probably don't say that. They're probably not allowed to say, and all your troubles will go away. Although, you know, they have wording down there that suggests all your troubles will go away. And the right way to think about this is the reason I actually led this session off with this analysis of health, because this article that I'm talking about is saying, yeah, maybe yes and maybe no. We don't have proof. And in the absence of proof, when you take something that you don't know what the results of concentrating it are, you can have damage. So for example, I've seen green tea concentrate linked to liver damage. And again, that's preliminary, but it's a footnote we should all pay attention to. I've never seen green tea, the consumption of green tea, linked to any liver damage. And part of the reason is you'd have to drink about 100 cups of it a day to get the concentration levels that you're getting in the pills. So I urge great caution about this because although we know there's benefit, there's risks that we don't understand. Yes.
Peter asks, does green tea stand out in health studies? I.e., is it the most highlighted for health among all the teas because it is the most studied?
This is also a cleverly asked question because so Peter is in essence asking, are we tricking ourselves into giving green tea all this credit because it's the most studied of all the teas? And I like this question a lot because we already see nutraceutical individuals, scientists, and pseudoscientists are all looking for evidence of the next great thing. And again, you know, they come by this honestly. These guys are really balanced when you think about it, because they're all looking for, give me the long life. Give me that elixir, which will fix everything. Green tea in the early years showed the most promise. This article that was published this year, in essence, says, yes, green tea shows great promise. We need to do more work. It doesn't say that the other teas don't show promise. It simply says green tea research is more studied than the other teas. So you know, and I can prove it to you. Let's look at, oh, wait a minute, I'm probably not supposed to use names. Okay, I'm not going to use names. Instead, I'll use other type of example. Let's look at people who have touted weight loss for oolong teas. They go on TV, do this, and all of a sudden, magically, you're going to lose weight. And then when you look at the science a little bit more carefully, you find, wait a minute, oolong tea speeds up the metabolism. But to speed up the metabolism, and by the way, that's not me barking, or some dog out there. Probably that's dog applause. Oh, they're holding up a sign. Yeah, you're saying the right thing. Green tea speeds up metabolism. Does metabolism also, is it related to self-control and being able, oh, I'm hungrier than ever. I got to eat more ice cream than ever. Does it help you stop consuming more? And the answer is, of course not. And so these things are much more complicated. And Peter's question is correct. We haven't done enough, we haven't done our homework yet. Yes.
And in that question, there's another thread that you kind of touched on, but I think as I read it, about which teas have been studied the most in terms of overall health impact. And you've spoken in previous sessions about with white teas, frequency of study. But even when we were talking earlier about, well, what's driving the train also? I think implicit maybe in your question, what's driving the train? What's driving the train on the studies themselves, since every 10 years we get a study on how good coffee is supposed to be for you, blah, blah, blah. But, and is that, yeah, what do you know about that?
It turns out I do happen to know engineers that drive these trains. So let's talk about some of these engineers. Let's talk about white tea to start out with. In 2006, white tea was an also ran in tea production in China. Probably, I want to say about 2% of total tea production. Maybe I'm wrong by 1%, maybe it was 3% was white tea. It was some small number, very small number. Then 2007 rolls around, Chinese scientist publishes an article and says, hey, ladies and gentlemen, he didn't say that. He said, ladies, look what I found. When you consume white tea, your skin benefits. And all of a sudden, 50% of the population in China, hey, I gotta have some of this stuff. So let's go back to the original question. What are the engineers? What's driving the train? So I mentioned nutraceuticals because in some ways, trying to make money is a portion of what's driving the train. In some ways, industrial giants, this would be food industrial giants, are driving that train too. Now let's fund some studies to prove that such and such a compound, which by the way, I happen to have a big stake in, provides a health benefit. So you don't need to look further than what you already see with all the foods and the studies that are funded and the incentives to make people believe that something is really, really good for them, and therefore they'll spend money. So money drives the train. And by the way, this is not okay. I don't want to seem like I'm dissing scientists because actually scientists are the lifeblood of what's going on here. But in order for them to afford to do the studies and in order for universities to afford to provide equipment and so forth, there needs to be funding. And the funding really comes from three sources. You have government sources. Government may have an interest in a particular subject. You have industry sources, and then you have private donors. So you have three sets of sources where money is generally funneling in to promote interests. Now, in the green tea area, so the question already came up this morning, and I haven't answered it yet, or I haven't answered it publicly. And the question was, okay, why aren't the other teas having as many studies? So this is an order issue more than anything else, because Japanese weren't drinking oolong tea. So they had no interest. They didn't care, actually, because they weren't drinking it. But they were drinking a lot of green tea, and they're producing a lot of green tea. The Chinese picked up on that real quick as they got their science up and going. You know, they had been doing some science since 1949, but they started to do a lot of science after 1980, and a lot of good science after 1980. But by that time, they're looking across, oh, Japanese are doing all this stuff on green tea. We're big green tea consumers. Let's go do some science. The Indians, India is what I'm talking about, Sri Lanka, started to do a lot of research about black tea, red tea, excuse me. But in the literature, they call it black tea, of course, and that's why I made that mistake. Does this mean that the Chinese aren't also interested? No, they're interested and they're doing research in it, but the Indians have a greater incentive to drive that train because most of their crop is red tea. They produce about 1.2 million tons of tea a year. 90% of that is red tea. So you're seeing, think of COVID. Don't think of COVID. Let's remember, though, that COVID occurred. And right at the beginning of COVID, boink, here comes this study out of India. Oh, red tea, in effect, cures COVID. That wasn't the leading headline. What they said was red tea brings COVID to a stop. It prevents it from replicating. It didn't say it cured it because that would be false, but it did say it prevented it from replicating. Now, as science has progressed since that initial study, and that initial study was out in March, no, not March, I think in June of 2020. And it caught my eye right away. And actually, there were British associated with that study too. So I started to give it a little bit more credence because it wasn't just an Indian thing. It was you had scientists from other places also looking at the data. And to this day, their studies seem to indicate that for certain types of COVID, especially when it's attacking certain areas, and that would be when it's coming through the mouth and nasal area, if you get drinking red tea right away, you do seem, or it seems like it prevents it from multiplying. So in effect, without using that C word, it is that, right? It stops it, so to speak. However, if that's not the source, so for example, if it's in your blood, and if that's really the source of where it is, you can drink all the red tea you want, and you're still in trouble. You gotta understand where the sources are. And that's why this becomes very complicated. And that's why it's easy for things to have a headline. And this thing, when it came out, did it have a headline? And it caught my attention right away. Oh, this is really cool. So 4 years later, the Chinese come out and said, oh, green tea also has an ability to do this. And it appears like it's in the same, again, it's not a cure, but it appears to prevent reproduction. So these studies are ongoing, and the engineer driving the train is really, how does it apply to my culture? How does it apply to what I'm doing in terms of producing a dollar? How does it apply to my population? Does this mean every scientific study is blind like that? No. You have more and more great scientific studies which are multiculturally done, multinationally done, and you're getting results, including this this study, which is urging everybody, let's do more work. We're not there yet. We need to have better information because consumers are trying to use the initial information we're giving, and nutraceutical people are jumping the gun and trying to get out there and be in front of the wave. And again, I understand this. I mean, everybody's trying to make some sort of profit, or in a less money-driven model. Perhaps they're trying to cure a population of some awful condition, and these things are laudable. But the point here is use care, analyze all the way, be a true scientist. Yes.
Have any of the studies that you've read discussed the synergistic effects of other compounds with ECGC, which speaks to the earlier question that Peter had in another way about concentration, or that Jonathan had, about the taking a pill versus the drinking of the entire compound thing of the tea with everything else that's in there at the same time. How do things work together?
This is a great question. So, and this is the heart of the matter, as it turns out. And this is why you can't sit in isolation and say, if I take this nutraceutical, I'm going to be 100% cured. Because more and more of these studies point to, wait a minute, we don't understand the full synergistic effect. It's true in a test tube. EGCG is the magic bullet for cancer or tumor cells. That's a test tube. We don't know even in animals yet. And since nature doesn't seem to work as a single source provider, in other words, it isn't, every time we think we found something in nature that's beneficial, we find it's interacting with other things. Why wouldn't this be the same? I can almost 100% authoritatively answer that question is, of course, there must be other things within the tea that it's interacting with. And that's what I think this article that I'm referring to is talking all about. It's like, understand everything. And we're getting closer to being able to do that, because as we go and get better information, we're able to aggregate more information, we're able to analyze more information. It becomes magic, because these things, not magic, it becomes, we really understand at a deeper level, which is what we have to do. All right, I can tell because the producer is standing very close to me, which means I probably have oh my gosh, I have overtalked, that it's time for a commercial break. And so go ahead and hum a tune, and 10 seconds later, This is really good. Get back one tunes. What? Okay, no, we're doing this one. Okay. So it is my great pleasure to introduce all the cats and Bijou Tea Master.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I'm thirsty. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, good morning. Yeah, so we do green tea still from the Anhui, our province in China. So we focus, the standard, okay? The 2 cups, then so 5 grams. Okay. Yeah, I prepare how we do press so we can see, the one more. Yeah. So 5 grams, 2 minutes.
Oh,
This
I'll set the time for 2 minutes.
yeah. This I follow, the home everybody. So 2 cups, okay? 2 cups.
So the tableau is what you expect to see. It's what you've seen for all these weeks for the tea. Couple cups, a strainer, tea toy, and a tray. By the way, you should get your notes out about the other teas that we tasted during this series. And you can think about this in comparison to what we've had already. We're going to end up using around 170-degree water. Make sure everything's real clean. Nothing to interfere with the original flavor. Oh, 这个是175。对。Oh, yeah. So the tea master is making sure I'm awake this morning and saying the right things. So far, I've passed the test. You notice there's a rhythm, and that's always the thing I point out because nothing seems too fast or too slow. Tea master has a rhythm, tea has a rhythm. All of you have personal rhythms. So as you do that, you engage your personal rhythm by being present. When you're present, when you're fully paying attention, you can fully get into your rhythm. Tea master puts the water, the final dissipation of steam, aeration into a kettle which has a nice spout. And that's so that she can control the pour more easily. Pour it on the sides. Yes, I set the timer for 2 minutes. Most of the leaves on top. Beautiful. So what is it about Anhui Province that they produce so many famous teas? So the famous teas that you're aware of are Wang's Creation, Premier's Choice, several of the teas that we've already tasted during this set of green tea sessions. All the localized green teas, the small varietals, and there are a ton of small varietals in Anhui. And it really is driven by two areas. One area is the Yellow Mountains. And the Yellow Mountains is slightly north of Chemung County. And that environment, the air is good, the water resources are plentiful, the soil is favorable for tea growing. So that's one of the reasons you get so much tea growing there. It's just a beautiful area. Eye appealing, lots of different vegetation. Then you go to the east, you go a little north, and I can't get my directions right, but I'll eventually get it right. You actually go to the west, north and west, to the Dabier Mountain area. And that's where most of the yellow tea are from Anhui comes from. And again, rich water resources, plenty of really good soil, lots of rain, lots of fog. Again, a perfect type of environment. Yes.
We talk a lot about soil content with the oolong for the minerals in the tea and for the contribution of the soil's elements to the quality of the taste. Are there studies out there, or is there in China by tea literati about the soil of one part of China where tea is processed versus another and is grown?
Yeah, this is a great question. We spend so much time because it's such a distinctive part of the cliff tea terroir, that is that minerality. And we don't spend that same amount of time talking about the terroir characteristics of some of the other teas. And they do all have characteristics. Those characteristics are harder to, they don't stand out as easily. And here's the reason why. Because most of those characteristics are related to pH of soil. So pH of soil is a little bit harder to define in terms of a distinctive taste. It does create a distinctive taste from one area to the other, but it's not so obvious to the tea drinker. Oh, this is 4.6. Oh no, it's 4.8. No, it's not at that level versus the cliff teas where we see that minerality, we taste that minerality. And as we go to specific areas in the mountains, you can't leave that minerality because it's become so distinctive. So yes, there are terroirs. We pay attention to them. Color of soil, composition of soil, all those things matter, but they matter less to you because the area that we're talking about in general is not as well defined as the Wui Mountains. The Wui Mountains is a large, extremely well defined, even by gradation, to that 7.7 square kilometer area, where it's absolutely the most minerality. And it's because of how that soil in that area is. All right, so let me enter the quality arena. Look for astringency, aftertaste, and energetics. Okay, I have a feeling that this is one of those teas that the astringency is going to build. Seems light on the first sip. I get an aftertaste in this. I'm working on the energetics. Second, I'm thinking about aroma and taste. Gosh, I think I might have to think about self-control because I could easily go through this very fast, as it turns out. So I'm giving you a heads up. you're going to have to exercise self-control. Well, you don't have to do anything, but if you don't exercise self-control, you're going to drink through this very fast. All right, it's your turn to brew. I've already ascertained what I think the quality of this is. I'm gonna put 2 minutes on the timer.
Kathy shares, the dry leaves smell sweet and fresh, but not as malty as Sentinel.
Oh, great. Okay. Sweet and fresh for the dry leaves, not as malty as cinnamon. And thank you for referring back to one of the teas that we've done, because this is exactly the benefit of taking great notes and being able to compare. And one of the reasons I shared, and that was a great comment, by the way. One of the reasons I shared that opening story about the teapot with the exact same leaves and timing and so forth, and how the flavors came out differently is, again, we're going through these things side by side. And as you see or experience the tea side by side, you see the differences, obviously, which they become obvious. Whereas if you're just drinking a cup one day, you drink another cup the next day, yeah, eventually you feel the difference. But here it becomes very obvious because you're present. Your rhythm is present. So congratulations. The ZT Master is really focused. She's really, really present. Leaves go into the heated glass. Water goes into the kettle with a spout. Timers are set for 2 minutes. Okay. All right. So the previous question about the terroir is a really important question. I answered a portion of it. The other portion of that answer, which you should be aware of, is different areas have microclimates. And the microclimates, in particular, number of days of fog are so different place to place. And that's really a consideration as you're thinking about the various teas, because you're going to get more of certain flavors with certain types of microclimates versus other type of microclimates. So yes, we do focus on that. And yes, everywhere we go, when we go out to the tea fields, we ask the questions. Okay, what is the pH of this? All right, how do you experience summers here? What's it like? You know, how many foggy days? We ask all those questions because over the years, we've seen that they make a difference. But again, not enough of a difference because these areas are generally speaking smaller. When you go to the Ilau Mountains, that's in Yunnan, and you're talking about the huge World Heritage Site, that's a different question because there's more uniformity in that, and we can address that uniformity. But when you go to where this is grown, there's not a huge enough area. This still belongs to a smaller area, even the famous teas. So let's talk for a minute about Wong's creation of Premier's Choice. Those are very, very famous teas, but the areas where they grow are still relatively smaller compared to the cliff teas. Timer's gone off. And you've separated the water from the tea leaves. And you've taken your notes out, as Kathy did. And you're comparing them to what you've had. And you're beginning to have a sense of, I appreciate this because of X characteristic. In doing this series, by the way, and in doing the research for this series, one of the things, and you saw when I talked about the studies and so forth, I realized, you know, we live here in the shop with great appreciation of all the styles of tea. But at the end of the day, we frequently find ourselves coming back to green teas because green teas in some way feel like the start of tea to us. Completely unoxidized, just a really good feel to them. And so we consume at least one green tea a day, at least one, sometimes a couple green teas a day. It may seem like we live in the oolong world, but boy, oh boy, we're getting a lot of green tea too. We love it.
Dylan says, it's very delicate and smooth at first. The flavors seem to build more gradually than many greens. Are those floral and maybe bamboo notes we're detecting?
Great comment by Dylan, talking about buildup. And I like this because delicate and building. And this is this tea. Those are the exact words I would use. Dylan's also detecting some other flavor in there. Maybe a floral, maybe a bamboo, something else going on. There is other stuff going on in this. And that's why I'm trying to slow you down a little bit because, again, the tendency for me in drinking this is so easy to drink. I can consume this very quickly without thinking about everything that's going on in it. And let me go back to those opening lines. A buildup, it's like it's going to go other places. Love that comment.
Peter says, this tea is a big flirt up front and then withdraws completely, waiting to be drawn out. Careful not to pass by this by drinking too quickly.
Oh my goodness. So Dylan laid out the start. Peter fills in the blanks. A big flirt. So that's what this buildup is, a big flirt. This tea, and I love this, in some ways is a tease, so to speak. That was an accident. I didn't mean to say it that way, but yes, it is a tease. And so everybody can feel right away, oh, this is good. But why is it good? What is it about it as it starts to reveal itself that makes it such a good tea? And hey, by the way, why did I name it Dazzling again? Maybe because of all these things you're starting to detect. Great catch. This is the tea, by the way, while you're thinking, still thinking, that if you had somebody who came into your life and said, I hate green tea. The doctor ordered me to drink it because I got cardiovascular issues. I hate it. All of it's bitter. This is the green tea, this particular one, which would turn everybody's head in an instant who starts there. There's not even a hint anywhere of bitterness. Yes.
Jen says, everything about this tea is light and dancing, like sunlight glittering on water.
Sunlight glittering on water, a flirt, a buildup. All of these are talking about there's exciting stuff if you give it time going on with this tea. Yes.
The first scent is airy and the faint kettle corn, air popcorn with a hint of caramel. The deeper I get into the scent, the more developed the caramel becomes to me, but never overwhelming.
Airy, almost a corn scent, almost a popped corn scent, and
Caramel.
a sense of caramel. And as this is Jen, right?
Yes.
As she goes down into the tea, it becomes more pronounced, that sense of caramel, but not overwhelming. Is that what she said?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Never overwhelming.
Yeah, never overwhelming. And I like this description because all of you have built up to where Jen's going. It's building up to something. That's what Dylan said. Hint of floral, maybe hint of bamboo. Peter said, oh no, this is a flirt. This is a full-on flirt. There's more stuff being exposed. And Jen is going down to, yeah, here's the essence. Go ahead.
The tea water, or Jen, the tea water I find smooth and clean with just a low, relatively pleasant level of astringency.
Love this comment. Here is a critical comment. Smooth and clean. Extremely clean. Uniform. Nothing out of place. And again, that smoothness is why I told you, even before you started doing this, you're going to have to use self-control because it's so smooth. You could drink through all of this. If you were in the shop here talking to friends, in 2 minutes, you would see, wait a minute, who drank out of my cup? This is all gone. I never drink this fast. It's that sort of feeling. Did I leave anything off?
Nope,
Okay.
but there's more, but wait, there's more.
Oh, wait, there's more. I love more.
It says the taste is a swirling light mix of delicate greens, chewy caramel, and toasted corn, but the flavors are gauzy and fleeting and constantly trading places. Never one overwhelming, never one dominating, but all playfully trading places.
Oh my God. The flirty comes into place. Trading places, flavors, trading places. Oh, even better, gauzy. In other words, nothing stands out over another thing. It's all intermixed, trading places, fun.
Rob says, last week I described the scent of sentinel as round, wet with hints of boiled corn, but the smell of dazzling seems more like buttery corn stuff.
Ah, okay. Rob compared this to Sentinel and comes away with this being different because it's got buttery notes. Buttery notes of
Corn silk.
corn silk. Okay. And so backing up through all the other remarks about trading places, gauziness, a flirt, doing a build-up. You guys are describing, all of you, I should say, are describing this, how I experience it. Go ahead.
Kathy says, very juicy with a gentle astringent after effect.
Juicy. Kathy talks about the juiciness, and she's the first one. We're already this far in, and she's the first one who talks about a buildup of astringency. When you first have this thing, that astringency is really fleeting. In fact, you're not thinking this is going to be very astringent. And it really isn't, but there is a buildup. And what was the first part of her comment?
Very juicy.
Juicy, yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to get to. The juiciness of this is why I warned you in the beginning. You're going to consume this thing so fast if you don't slow yourself down that you will miss all of these things.
And then Dylan says, boy, the astringency is really building too.
Yes, the astringency does build. And when you're first in, it's like it's zero, almost zero, just minuscule. But even I, as I took that first sip, I knew, oh yeah, this is going to build up. And at some point, somebody's going to say, yeah, it's building. And you're correct. I love hanging out with this group because this group is always present. And being present is how you capture all of these flavors, is how you capture these feelings. I salute you because you guys are incredible. It's almost like I shouldn't even be up here because you really, really get into these and describe them in a way that the Chinese would understand. You must be real tea drinkers, the 1%ers. No, the 99%ers. At any rate, great job, everybody, today. This has been an incredible green tea journey. We love our green teas, and there's a reason that we love our green teas. And Dazzling is right at the top of the list. So you have responsibilities for next week. This next week, you are to remain healthy because next Saturday, you and I are going to go over graciousness, and I can't wait to do it. You guys have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Take care, folks.
Bye-bye now.